Okay, this is a little bit of conversation about Chapter 6. It goes over some of the details regarding Chapter 6. So let's go ahead and jump on in. So, when it comes to creating a new table, you can do that from an existing table. What you first have to do is set up the table, and then you're going to use a select statement along with the insert command to put data into a table. So here we are creating a level 1 customer table. It resembles the original customer table. And so we essentially create a table called level 1 customer, and it has all of the information that we have in the actual customer table. But here's the fun. This is where we can actually insert the data that's currently in the customer table, and it's from it's from the existing customer table into our level 1 customer table. So we're inserting into level 1 customer. We're selecting all the columns, and in this case, we're saying where the credit limit equals $7,500. That's going to be our new level 1 customer. Now, once we did this, by the way, we might need to go back and, depending on our requirements, maybe remove these customers from the standard customer table. Not sure. We're not going to go over that in this chapter because, again, that may or may not need to be done depending on what the company's needs were. You can update existing data in a table. So first we're going to do this update, and then we're going to talk a little bit about inserting data. When you go to do an update on data, you're going to use the update command along with the set. So let's see what that looks like. Here we're updating the level 1 customer, and we're setting the customer name equal unique gifts and toys, where the customer number equals 796. So this is a very specific update. We're changing the customer's name on an existing record. This is pretty standard, pretty basic. But we can also do something that's a little bit more encompassing. It can get more than one row of data. In this case, we're doing an update on level 1 customer. We're setting the credit limit equal 8,000, where the rep number is equal to 45, and the balance is greater than 2,000. Now, as we can see, the results is that only one row was updated. But if the table, the level 1 customer table, had more rows that matched the rep number of 45 with the balance of 2,000, it would have set the credit limit to 8,000 for those rows as well. We can insert we can insert data into a table by using the insert statement. So here we are inserting into the level 1 customer a new row of data, and when you're doing it this way, where you haven't specified the actual column names, you have to supply the data for all the column names except any auto-incrementing number if there was a one that existed. This table doesn't have one, so we're doing insert into level 1 customer values 907, which is the customer number, Glenn's British Toys, and look at where we have Glenn's, that double apostrophe, it's 2 single apostrophes, and that's because since the single apostrophe is special to SQL, whenever we want to use that, we have to escape it by using 2 of them. So when this actually gets inserted into the table, Glenn's will only have 1 apostrophe. And then we're putting the other values, the 0, the $7,500 credit limit, and the rep as 45. Okay, auto commit, commit, and rollback. Auto commit is default transaction mode, and it basically means that when you are writing in your queries, that they're committing immediately. So if you do an update and you run it, it automatically happens. In some versions of like Apex and even other system database applications, you can turn the auto commit to turn it off. If you do that, then when you run a query, it's only temporary until you actually fully commit it or roll it back. So we can turn that auto commit off, and we tend to do this when we're in a database with multiple users or we need more control over transactions. So what happens when we turn that auto commit off and then we do updates or inserts, they're only temporary and we can see them, but they're actually not really committed. And they're not until we either run the commit command, which then saves the changes, or we roll back by issuing the rollback command, which reverses the changes. Now, if you leave your work session with items that have not been committed, they are forgotten. Now remember, rollback changes, the command only reverses changes made to the data, and that commit commands are permanent. So running rollback after commit cannot reverse the updates. That kind of makes sense. Once you've committed, you're done. Now you can then start a whole new set of transactions that haven't been committed, but that commit is just like if the auto commit was turned on, it's done. Now with that being said, it is worthwhile to tell you that most of the time, auto commit's turned on, it's left on, and in a lot of systems nowadays, you can't even really turn them off. In fact, our Apex Online, you don't have the ability to turn the auto commit off. So don't worry about it in most cases. In fact, I'll show it to you where the older Apex system, and if you've downloaded the older Apex system, where you can do it. But for the most part, we just need it to know this for the informational factor. It also leads into this conversation called transactions. Now, a transaction is, like it says, a logical unit of work. Think of transaction as, hey, I've got to do a bunch of updates, all for this one major action. So let's say, for example, someone is inserting a new user, wants to put a new user into our system. Well, let's say to do that, you have to put that user information in 3 different tables. Maybe table 1 is their username and login, the second table is their address information, and the third table is all of their permissions and roles. If for some reason we started that transaction and the system happens to go down while it's only halfway through, that transaction, that data would not be successfully written across all 3 tables, and we'd have corrupt data. So one way to get around that is create transactions that essentially say, hey, this block of work has to happen all together. If it doesn't, then anything that might have been done needs to be rolled back. So that's what a transaction is. We also use the commit and rollback commands to support transactions. Before starting an update for a transaction, you need to commit any of the previous updates. That's typical, especially when we get down the road here and we start writing actual store procedures. You tend to start a transaction, do the work, and then figure out, do I need to commit or do I need to do a rollback? Here's what I was telling you in the older Apex. If you've downloaded it and you installed it on your machine, you have the right permissions, you can turn this box called auto commit off. If you're on the online Apex, you'll notice it's not there. Don't worry about it. You really can't turn it off on the online. It's not that big of a deal. Changing and deleting existing rows. So this is, it's funny, is I'm not sure. It was part of this particular slide as well with the auto commit. So again, when we want to change or delete existing rows, here is a great spot where it's updating the row. When the customer number is 665, it's changing the name to a different name. If we want to delete a row, we can use the delete command and delete data from the table with using the where clause. All rows satisfying the condition will be deleted. If no conditions, then all rows will be deleted. So let's take a moment to talk about the delete command. Most places that you will work, in my experience, are very negative on the use of the word delete. Deleting data is like throwing away stuff that's valuable. We don't know why it might be valuable, but we think that one day it could be valuable. So for most systems, and also for integrity of that system, typically we don't delete data. We might mark it as inactive, but we don't delete. But nonetheless, if you want to delete data, you can do so. But just be careful. If you don't put a where clause in, there's a good chance you can delete all the rows of that table. That's kind of why they put the delete here with the auto commit, because sometimes it's good to run these deletes before you actually commit them, see what they look like, make sure you don't actually mess up data. Again, for a lot of systems, the auto commit is just kind of what it is. What I do to get around that is I will always do select statements. I will change the word delete and put the select star, so that way I can see the rows I'm about to delete before I actually delete them, and then I change the select star back to the word delete. So here we're deleting from that level 1 customer table where the customer number is 893. Now imagine if I forgot to put that where clause on there, I would delete all the rows. If we issue a rollback command, then all the rows that we've deleted will come back, and it will be like we've done we didn't do the delete at all. Again, it doesn't really work for a lot of systems, but that's how you would do that. There are times where you want to change a value to turn it back to an actual null, which again, think of a character like a varchar column. Empty string, is not the same as a null value. Null really means the absence of data. So kind of remember, just changing a string field into a quote quote. Actually, there's data there. It's just it's a string with no value in it. It's different than a null. So sometimes we want to change data back to a null. To do that, we set it to null. Update level 1 customer, set balance equals null, where the customer number equals 665. All right. We can change a table structure. We can add new tables. We can delete tables no longer required. We can add new columns to a table, and we can change physical characteristics of existing columns. To do that, we're going to use the alter table command, which allows for changing a table structure. We can use the add clause to add a new column. We can assign values to new columns. And we can also use an update command to change all rows of most common values. We can also change individual rows. So here we're altering this table, the level 1 customer, and we're going to add a new column called customer type, and we're going to make it a char 1. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and set that default value, which in this case is going to be customer type equals R. You can see we have no where clauses, and since we've omitted the where clause, all rows will be updated to customer type equals R. Now, let's go back and update just those specific rows of data that we want to be different. So in this case, we're updating that level 1 customer table again. We're setting the customer type to S, where the customer number equals 334. So now we've updated that one row to S, while all the other ones are still R. Using the describe command, we can see attributes of our table. And here is that customer type table with a char of 1 character. Now, as I told you, we can modify a table structure. We can use the modify clause of the alter table command, change characteristics of existing columns. We can change a column that currently rejects null values, so we can say use null in place of not null, and we can increase and decrease the size of a column. So here, we're altering that table, the level 1 customer, and now we're modifying that credit limit to not null. So we're saying, hey, that column used to allow nulls. Now in this table, we're no longer going to allow nulls in that credit limit column. Now, it should be said that while we've talked about some ways to change existing structures, as your database gets more complicated with more tables, and you start putting foreign keys and constraints, and you have all these primary keys, and you have all this data, and all these things linked together, and all these relationships, you will create a structure that is really difficult to update via SQL. Now, out of the gate, there are some things you just can't do. You might not be able to eliminate multiple columns. You're not going to be able to change the order of columns, and you can't really combine data from two tables into one. There's a way to do that, sort of, but it's not a lot of fun. So a lot of times, what you need to do, especially if the data from the two tables have different columns, right? If it's two sets of columns, then it's almost impossible. You have to, instead, for all of these, plus anywhere you're going to have those complex pieces, you're just going to have to create a new table with all of your new sets of data, and then copy the data as needed into this new table, reassign or re-link any of your relationships, and so forth and so on. So first we might have to, and then, well, so I shouldn't say first, after we've duplicated that data and we've done all those changes in that new table and we're ready to link up and we've done all the linking, now we can drop that table, the original table, to get rid of it. And again, we know that dropping a table permanently removes table and all its data from the database. So here's how you do that. You drop a table. So that's it. That is chapter 6 in a nutshell. I know we went through that pretty fast, but again, if you need to, go back, watch the video where you need to, make sure you read the book, and send me any questions you might have. Thanks.